Hi, everyone. Welcome back to First Principles. Today, we've got Vadym with us today. How are you doing, Vadym?
Hello, nice to see you, Saagar.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. We'll be talking about management consulting. And I just want to start off with just your brief background, like, what have you been doing?
Yes, nice to see you. I'm Ukrainian, 7 years of experience, half on corporate side, half on consultant side. Consultants worked at McKinsey at marketing and sales practice, went for MBA to expand, become more generalist consultant,
Hmm,
and worked in the US after MBA, was impacted by big tech layoffs, now work as independent consultant.
right. Perfect. Thank you, Vadym. Okay, so you've had a wealth of experience. I would like to know, what is management consulting? How would you define it?
Yeah, just before the start of the recording, we talked about the different types of consulting, and so people usually say, "What that management consulting? It's probably McKinsey, it's probably Ernst Young." So I'm thinking Accenture, and I'm thinking about each of these companies as in different buckets, as
Yeah,
different types of organization.
yeah.
So McKinsey, I would call it strategy consulting. EY, I would call it management consulting, and I would call Accenture technology consulting. And there are companies who specialize in other areas like organizations consulting.
Okay.
Strategy consulting is about usually for senior leaders, and they help develop the agenda for the whole organization, which is like a scale down. Very frequently is what the board wants to do or what the board wants CEOs to do.
Hmm.
So when you develop an investor deck for the shareholders, that's basically to help you understand what should be in the deck, and they scale it down to business units. Organizational consulting, like EY, tax consulting, accounting, legal, implementation of organizational systems, operational systems. They usually help business units. So business unit leader wants to make efficiency, increase efficiency of their operations of their business unit. And that's where they usually help. A lot of financial work, sometimes operational work, for example, implementation of IT systems, but the goal there is cost saving. Tech, tech consulting like Accenture, they implement new systems like SAP, ERP, and their managerial work is about the implementation in terms of processes of those systems, which is also very important. But the key skill set is how to implement those IT systems in a productive way. Each of those, there are overlaps across all of these, but each of these companies have their core capabilities. There are also engineering firms, and they might do operations consulting, for example, for factories to increase cost saving and operational efficiency of those factories. And they say we do managerial consulting, but at least it's in my head that managerial consulting is business unit consulting. So the strategy consulting, your client is your CEO. Managerial consulting as a financial head of functional head, for example, CFO, CMO, chief marketing officer, business unit leader, general manager. IT consulting usually that would be IT leader or leader of IT in one of the business units.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, I want to just say some of this back to you as well. So, I'm assuming like a triangle here. At the top are the strategic consulting firms like McKinsey, BCG, Bain and Company. I don't know Booz Allen and I don't know. Is that the word? Is that the company's name? Booz Allen, whatever. If
Yeah.
that's part of the first tier as well or not, but either way. Second is what is typically known as the big four accounting firms, but they are also in consulting, and you are classifying them as management consultants because they are focused on the business unit. So they are not focused on what is should be the vision and how should this be implemented at a broad level. they know that, they assume that knowledge, and they are essentially operating at the level of how to run a functional unit in an efficient way. And if they need specialized skills like tax saving, accounting, law, legal firms, whatever, so they can offer those specialized services. So that's the second tier, of course, apart from accounting, because they are also accountants. The third one is, you said, is the tech consulting, where implementation of client relationship management softwares like SAP, etc. So let's say SAP does not, do the implementation on its own. A third party is
Yes.
going to do it. Infosys and Accenture mostly does this. You're also saying that there are engineering consultants, there are smaller consultants, and they kind of offer other services as well. Okay,
Yes.
so in your opinion, is this just like different categories, 1, 2, 3, with same level of let's just say superiority and same level of impact, or is there a hierarchy here between the first type and the last type that we talked about?
So, in terms of prestige, there is
Hmm.
some kind of hierarchy, and it correlates usually with salaries. And it's primarily driven by, again, the level of salaries of people who are clients on the customer side, as well as the
Hmm.
scale of organizations. Small startups usually wouldn't hire McKinsey because they would spend all their money they have.
Hmm.
So it's quite unusual. But
Yeah.
whether it is pure hierarchy in terms of values they deliver, they just do different things.
Different things, but I guess there might be some kind of a difference in terms of impact, assuming that once you design something or catch a flaw early on, the impact's going to be very different. So, it's almost like course correcting at like 50,000 feet. It can vary. You end up in Sao Paulo or New York. Okay, all
Absolutely,
right.
absolutely. And you as an employee, if at McKinsey, you can work directly with a business leader,
Hmm.
vice president, and help them define the strategy for the whole organization. You would usually have projects which would have impact in tens to hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hmm.
Whereas when you work, for example, at Accenture, there are additional 50,000 people doing pretty much the same job, and your
Right.
goal is to implement this piece or SAP for those couple of teams. And it's still very important, but you
Right.
just wouldn't have access to the same level of organizational impact in the organization just because you have different clients.
Right. Okay. So I suppose for the purposes of this conversation, we can limit our definition of management consulting to what you are referring to as strategic consultants. The
Mhm.
McKinseys of the world, the tier ones. Okay. Now, at a very basic level, definitionally speaking, how would you define consulting or a consultant? Forget about any kind of prefix to it. What is a consultant?
Hmm. It's a person, it's a profession in which we help clients solve their greatest challenges using problem-solving skills.
Okay. So a person who has a certain, I guess, panache for solving problems for others because they want to get paid, and
Yes,
this person is going to help somebody else who's willing to pay solve a particular problem, assuming obviously that the subject matter expertise and the skill set
yes.
between the problem and the solutioning person overlap. Okay, but why not hire somebody? Why get into a consulting kind of relationship?
Yeah, usually it's because those greatest challenges are not the most frequent challenges. You
Okay.
don't expect, for example, to have layoff every day. You don't expect to acquire big company of your size every day. You don't
Hmm.
expect to enter a new market every day. So these are usually some kind of big challenges, big transformation, something which was what you can't cope day to day, and you want to get external experience from people who have done it in the past and help you structure and navigate in the new area.
And in your current structure with your contractors and companies, that know-how does not exist, right? That's why you want to hire somebody, obviously.
So, for example, you wouldn't have a lot of people specializing in M&A in a
Right,
corporate organization. So you
right,
may have people who would decide which would have knowledge of the market, so they
right,
have relationship for the negotiations. But there is a lot of execution work, like
right,
diligence work,
right,
or mm, execution of the deals themselves, and a lot of
right,
these services are outsourced because you don't want to have those people on all the time. And
right,
experts may specialize in some new industries. For example,
right,
you are an industrial firm and you want to buy a chemical firm. You may
right,
have people who have done M&A in industrials, but you don't have people in chemicals. But if you go to McKinsey, they
right,
would have experts who have done commercial diligence for the chemical firm, and they would know where to look, what should be the investment thesis, and whether it's a good target, as well as all the rigor that if your shareholders will start questioning, was it a good analysis, they can defend and explain through the rigor and methodologies and standards why it's a good approach and why this approach is defendable. Whereas if
hmm,
you have just a couple of people in your organization who didn't do this before and didn't do it in a standard way, there may be questions which would be very hard for them to answer.
right. Okay, so it's almost like hiring a CPA or a lawyer when you have accounting and law issues. But this is like if you have any other business issues, you hire this person. Okay, okay,
Exactly.
interesting, interesting. So, how would you distinguish between advisory and execution? And do these strategic consultants engage in both or just one?
Yeah, about what you said, before the meeting, you said you're interested in the origins
Hmm,
of strategy consulting, and
hmm,
what you mentioned about lawyers is
hmm.
actually those were the first two consultants in the true
Ah,
sense of the word, because of their training in standard processes. And
right,
many of them would have dual degrees like accounting, which they can do both legal work and financial work. And this
right,
merger of different credentials help them to problem solve with senior leaders. And because they
right,
were lawyers, they had access to the C-suite boards, and very frequently, even small new firms would
right,
start something in a regulatory or legal space and
right.
transition into new areas because of the access to the boards, C-suite, and senior leaders like shareholders in those companies.
Right, right, right. So I guess let me just put up a silly hypothetical to you. So let's say somebody is so inclined and they want to be a super consultant. So they take on a serious old school liberal arts classics kind of degree, right? Go on
Yeah,
to do some engineering, go on to do business, go on to do legal, law, and accounting. I guess that gives you a solid foundation to be like an overall person. Obviously, you will not be able to master everything, but like the breadth required, is that something that management consultants, people who hire consultants, look for, that you are interested in the breadth as well as the depth? Or is it just one depth that you're looking for?
I think they are interested in excellence. That's why
Yeah.
they usually hire from the highest level, highest rank universities. And
Mm,
it's for the same reason they may hire an athlete or a musician who was very accomplished in their area, because
right,
they can teach many aspects of consulting, but they want people who have discipline, rigor, willingness to put this extra effort in excellence in what they do to actually provide that quality results. These
interesting.
firms these firms have a lot of experts and access to a lot of experts who will provide a specialized results, but they need this excellence and rigor to take advice of those experts and package them for the client. And that's probably the main reason why it's so hard to break into strategy consulting, because usually there are just very few standard but very limited passes into this.
Mhm.
And not that many people go to Harvard Business School or some similar educational universities. Not that many Olympiad athletes with gold medals, and not that many special forces officers who would get into this path.
Okay, so
Besides, yeah, please.
academic excellence, excellence in, like, I guess, soldiership, if that's the work, because special forces is like the highest order. So they'd get people from everywhere, knowing the fact. So let's say they are hiring an excellent ex basketball player who is now aged
Yes.
out and also has degrees and stuff. They
Yes.
mostly have experience with basketball. So how are they going to advise somebody on acquiring an agri company, acquiring an FMCG company? Is there training there, or is this like
Yeah.
they're looking for? Okay, so they're looking for
So
the engine to grasp it.
you very frequently these athletes, for example, a basketball player, before deciding to go into consulting, they don't. It's not usually a dream or a great basketball player to become management consultant. There is a journey, and usually in the process they go some kind of exploration. And business schools is a standard example of this kind of ground where these athletes would learn base skills and do their exploration and decide
Right.
that instead of going into, for example, managing marketing of basketball teams, or managing finance of basketball teams, or being a commentator and influencer, they decide to go into consulting. So usually education and exploration happens in the same place, and McKinsey's of the world would go to those universities, and that's where they would have access to these athletes, army officers, everyone who decided to do this career switch.
Right, right.
But they
Okay,
have
okay.
some programs, direct programs, for example, usually for junior positions, when you have like mentorship and all the support and training, they just would
Right.
usually start at lower level, and there is a journey for maybe a couple of years where this athlete would start this transformation. It's
But
not typical. It's very limited, but I have seen those.
okay. So for folks who are starting, so okay, these companies would prefer somebody who've already excelled in some other career, not just in school,
Yeah.
and then choose this as a second career. But there are people who apply as a first career. For them, you have rigorous training. I'm assuming that rigorous training is going to be training on the vibes and the grit and the etiquette of this particular industry, as well as the subject matter expertise in a sector that in the consulting sector, as well as the sector that they're advising. But what I'm asking is that for folks who come in, the already excellent people who come in, they might be excellent, but nobody knows everything. So
Yeah.
in order to deploy them towards a client, what kind of training is there? Or is there a training or not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's very well structured.
All right.
So people usually talk about strategy consulting as a factor of leaders. It's because of the training they get. So
Okay.
that's why you expect that if you hire a well-established basketball player, that the person will be a good consultant because that person will get all the training. But you don't expect the person to know the answers, and don't expect that person to have industry expertise.
Right.
That is coming from established leaders and experts which are being hired. So if you are a biotech expert with 25 years of experience in the industry, they would hire you, and you would be helping those basketball players with advice, because their job use rigor and discipline to structure your advice for the client.
Okay. All right. Got it. So you said that, and then you said that I said previously that management consulting is quite modeled on law. So I'm assuming that the career track is also modeled on law, because that was just a model which is available. So walk us through what a career track is for a management consultant in these big three firms.
Yeah, I would get standard entry process and additional process which emerge over time when you can join at later stages, like an experienced person, and maybe some of the non-traditional process which are emerging in the field. So I will start with the first, the usual. You go to probably top 20, top 30 universities, and usually McKinsey has presence, and depending usually on ranking of those universities, the depth of the presence would be very different, and the number of people they would hire would be different. So maybe for university number one, they would get 10, 15 people. from university number 20, maybe just 2 or 3. So they
Okay.
would have a cohort, a couple of hundred people hired for the most junior roles each year. And usually they have established programs for diversity, for women, for LGBT, for veterans, athletes. So there are a lot of categories. I don't know the shares of diversity versus traditional profiles, but there are multiple passes, and usually these are highly valuable for people with a high level of excellence and rigor, where they can enter from non-traditional paths into these new areas. For example, if you had rigorous musical school and you had musical training, and then you studied education in music, you can still go through these passes, and usually they find ways. So usually just do networking during your education in your university. There are usually alums of your schools, there are representatives, recruiters. You talk with them, you learn what they're doing, you understand why it's a good fit for you. You start preparing, like doing cases, you learn about maybe like basic tests, which they would do standard IQ tests, and you just prepare for standard recruitment process. And with it, you just go there. And usually this is typical for a couple of hundred people who would join in each of the top firms every year. So there'd be a couple of thousand people who would join every year at the most junior level.
What's the ratio? Applications versus acceptance? Like how competitive is it?
It's very competitive. I think it varies significantly across geographies. I think in India, I wouldn't be surprised 1,000 to 2,000 people per applicant. But keep in mind that those applications are not only from your school, but also from other people. So I'm telling you the total funnel. I don't know what would be the ratios at each specific university.
What about in the US? Like
I think it would be 1 to 200. That's my best guess, but I don't have. I think the average for the whole McKinsey is 1 to 500.
Okay. And before we continue with the whole sort of what the career track is, so is there a thing like if somebody really wants to get into management consulting, even though they did not really get because it's very competitive, but they're still good, is this like a winner take all position? Either you are in the big three or you just just do something else? No? Okay.
But it takes time. So if you don't have that level of access, you can join later, but it is definitely a journey, and relationship preparation and the effort and your understanding how you build your career for consulting would help you. But many people who would want to do this, may take you literally years. And do you actually want to delay your career just to get into this top firm? Because usually it's kind of like their opposite chicken and egg. People try to use these firms to accelerate their career, not the reverse.
Okay, got it. Okay, so after you get in, you come in as what, an intern, an analyst, an advisor. What are you called? The first rank.
So there are internships, and they are super helpful, and I think they would significantly help you with recruitment. And my perception is, if you got an internship during your university time to consulting firm, you have very high chances, let's say 75%, that you will get a job offer full time. So if you would really get through the internship, you would have a path to stay. So if they are highly valued and extremely competitive, but it's a very good option. Usually you start as an analyst. And there are different tracks. So there is like traditional consulting, but there are also expert tracks, specialized, for example, in operations, marketing, finance, in different areas.
Right. And then once let's say you choose the expert track for now and you want to change the expert track later on, or want to get into the general traditional consulting track, is that a possibility?
It's very hard. That's my personal. I'm not telling about how it happens in general. I don't have statistics. Personally, I saw it's very, very challenging, and I saw that many people were not able to do that. Essentially, that was the reason why I went for my MBA to do the switch.
Right. Because you wanted to be more general focused. That's what you wanted to do.
I just didn't
Traditional
want to do
consulting.
only marketing. I
Yeah,
wanted to do into other areas and just to
right.
have this breadth of projects and
Okay.
capabilities.
Okay. So let's say somebody chooses the general track, the
Yes.
traditional track. They start off as an analyst, and then what happens?
After a couple, after a year and a half, they become a senior analyst. And after maybe additional 2 years, if everything goes well, they would become an associate. Associate is a post MBA role. Names of the positions, McKinsey, Bain, BCG would be different. So, for
Okay.
example, BCG would have associates, but they're
Hmm.
equivalent to analysts in McKinsey, whereas
Okay.
their associates are called consultants. It doesn't
Okay. Okay.
change the nature of the position.
Got it. All right. So that's that. So let's stick with McKinsey then. So it's going to be associate.
Yeah,
After associate, what happens?
you become a project manager. So
You
the
become a
idea,
project manager. Okay.
yeah. So the idea is that interns, they just do some work and just try to learn what's going on. And
Hmm.
it's just more experience for them than for the
Hmm.
project themselves. There are not many expectations there for interns. When it
Yeah.
comes to analysts, they do core work and they do a lot of hard work, but it's
Okay.
quite repetitive and quite granular. So they just crunch numbers or
Hmm.
work on the interview transcripts or search some information through the databases, or
Right.
do build case studies.
Hmm.
Associate post-MBA consultants, they can work on more complicated work, which would require some prior experience, and usually they expected to problem solve directly with leaders, for example, functional leaders or
Right.
mid-level leaders in the company. So it
Right.
requires some level of maturity and ability to communicate complicated information, ask hard questions, and manage relationships there. So
At a
something,
strategy level.
yeah. So if you do business, so if you have a team, you have project manager, you have a associate who helps the project manager, and you have two business analysts.
Okay.
Business analyst would be crunching numbers, working on base level analysis. Associate would work with people on that side to get
Hmm.
data for them,
Hmm.
build the story, and the
Hmm.
project manager would be overseeing and guiding in which direction. There are different ways how you can do analysis, and the role of the project manager in McKinsey would be to build a strategy for strategy, what the frameworks should be, which capabilities we want to bring to the project, which capabilities we don't want, whether we want to add some kind of solutions. So solutions are like separate mini studies which could be connected. So
Hmm.
a project manager designs as well as integrates different work streams. The role
Hmm.
of project
Hmm.
manager would be different across firms. I'm talking what the project manager is doing at McKinsey, as well as documentation, structure, and planning of the project, building relationship with the client, but there's kind of downstream or operational aspects of the project. Was there a connection with associates and business analysts?
Okay. Okay. So this is after the associate, you've got the project manager.
Yes.
Then and project manager is like a formal title. It's not just a role in the company, it's a
It
formal title.
it's called engagement manager.
Engagement manager. Okay.
So you,
Okay.
as after associate, you get engagement manager.
Okay.
It's just a title.
Hmm.
So you would become a project leader, but for example, in BCG, so they
Hmm.
call engagement managers, they call them project leaders, PRs,
Right.
whereas McKinsey calls them EMs, engagement
Hmm.
managers.
Okay. Okay. So what happens after engagement manager? What's the next line?
Associate partner. The role of the
Associate
associate,
partner.
yes, their goal is to help with client relationship.
Hmm.
So they help with scoping and preparing the studies as well as on delivery, and they
Hmm.
support partners with business development.
Hmm.
So if a big partner manages a couple of clients, for example, consumer industry,
Hmm.
engagement manager would work on those projects, whereas associate partner would manage primarily relationships. For example, partner would manage Nestle would manage Kimberly-Clark and would manage Procter and Gamble. Associate partner would manage Procter and Gamble. An engagement manager would do projects for Procter and Gamble.
Got it, got it, got it. So partner is more like, let's say a program manager, a portfolio manager. And within the portfolio, an associate partner is focused on one particular client.
They are general managers. Partners
General.
are managing, they are generating and managing business. They are managing the bottom line in revenues and costs, whereas project managers are managing the project. They manage the delivery. They don't care that much about financials other than managing invoices or other like day-to-day finances, whereas the goal of the partner is to sell new business and generate profit for themselves and the company.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. So exclusive, and then also these 5 levels. Now, McKinsey, now I don't know how true that is because this is just coming from Wikipedia, but McKinsey has in its culture something called up or out, right? So if in 2 years you're not up, you're asked to leave. Is that the case? Okay. Talk to us about that. Like, what is that? What is that living like that?
So, when we talk about rigor during recruitment, they expect it to stay and develop this rigor internally. So it's kind of like an internal treadmill. And the idea that when you join McKinsey, BCG, Bain, you would continually build relationships with other people in the company, experts, project leaders, associate partners. And in the process, your goal is to make them very happy, and you would have continuously new developing expectations what you do. So first you do analysis, then you bring frameworks, then you start building relationships with a client, then you structure work of others, then you have integration of each of those. You start coaching your juniors, you start structuring the project for the project leader, then you start developing relationships and eventually start selling those projects at more senior level. And in this treadmill, new expectations just emerge over time. And if they ask you, hey, it would be great if you start selling projects, and you don't do this for 2 years, even if you were promoted just 2 years ago, it could become an issue, and it would be set in the performance reviews, and then it would become a problem that people would leave. It's very hard just to stay at the same level, although it is still possible.
Okay. But it's okay. So, but it's not like a federal job guaranteed, like off-the-shelf job. It needs to be constantly renewed again and again. In spite of, okay, so I guess one comment on that, because it's structured like a law firm, it becomes people, I guess everybody expects to be a partner. But unless you are building a firm that is somehow socialistic, like John Lewis Partnerships in the UK, everybody can't be a partner. So, either the firm grows. If the firm is growing, which means it's mostly in consulting, the only way it can grow, it consults others, or it starts new businesses of its own. So let's say McKinsey or any of these companies just has everybody in its pocket, right? Everybody is a client. There's only so many partners you can make. So the embedded growth obligation is there, but I am glad that the management consulting industry has that up or out kind of paradigm where people are going in, even if the mindset could be this is more like a master's degree, right? I go in for two years, I become an alum, make the networks, and then I actually lead actual companies. Okay, so that is great. That's a great way to offset the embedded growth obligation that law firms don't do that.
If you can find your clients, if you launch your solution or you launch new capability, you will become partner. If you can sell it, you will become partner. It's just very, very hard.
Right. True that. And also, you're not really like building anything new, right? You're not creating a startup. It's not a VC firm.
They have.
Okay, they have.
Partners do have those expectations, especially senior partners. They have their budget for investments, and they absolutely, and to go from expert or a project manager to partner,
Right.
very likely you need to build some specialized capability.
Oh,
And
nice.
very likely that just to go, if you on expert path, to go from a specialist to expert, probably you need to have kind of your very specialized niche in which you would develop something unique. It could be a very unique analysis for which other partners or managers would be coming to you, but it should be there. And McKinsey would say, we are selling this project because we have this expert over here who's doing this unique work, which no other firm in the world, no other person can deliver. And it is highly specialized. It's just that expectations to the expert and to the partner are different. That expert just does their own analysis, or maybe analysis which a couple of analysts would deliver, whereas a partner's goal is to create like internal startup which would be selling completely new type of business. They can create mini practices like AI practice, Internet of Things practice. They can create robotics practice, culture practice. And practice means that they would pull senior partners from other areas. It is culture practice from museums, public sector, and other practices, and combines portfolio of business and create new capabilities and offerings there. And it is basically they're building new business unit inside McKinsey. And this is essentially how it is grown.
So the culture, but apart from consulting, McKinsey is building, I guess it's intelligence, I don't know, it's intellectual property. And in that, building its capabilities with the expert, with the product, with the research, which is already out. And again, when I say McKinsey folks, I mean, these big ones, all of them. And they're doing that. So it's also like a think tank in a way, if you think about it, right? Because they have like a mini university.
It's very well structured. So I think the average utilization, like if you take the average of the whole firm, would be for client projects would be probably 50%. And you would have 20-25% devoted to this research, new capability development. McKinsey gets those ridiculous fees because they invest so much in R&D. When I mean R&D, I mean development, new intellectual property. And a lot of what is later becoming new fancy startups would be just those capabilities which those people develop at the very cutting edge, and later it's become commercial by someone else. And you have some kind of public company which emerged from a startup, from people who just done this analysis ad hoc here. But McKinsey invests a lot of money to be constantly on that cutting edge, because that's why they get those fees. They need to justify them.
Okay, so there is a certain level of maturity and grit again, because 25% to 30% of your workforce, if it's not working on client projects, a lot of folks consider that wasted money, but not McKinsey and not the big ones, because this is the reason. All right. I do need to ask you something curious about the whole startup example. So people working in these capability units, if one of them starts a startup, why does McKinsey help them? What's in it for McKinsey? Like, why would they help them? This is just a separate entity that has started. So why is McKinsey basically playing the role of a VC or a seed funder?
They need to justify their fees. They need to sell new business. And if they want to have a Google business for, I don't know, $20 million, $100 million, they need to find a justification why it's better to pay them 100 million rather than go to EY and pay 50 million, rather than to go to some other small firm and do it for 10 million. And please.
Go ahead.
You would bring some cutting edge capabilities.
So no, that part I understood. So you get the cutting edge capabilities, but then you said that some of those capabilities are spun off as startup companies. So I'm just wondering why.
It's usually in reverse. Sometimes they create or acquire, and they are integrated as new capabilities in the firm. They have internal incubation, and they are acquiring capabilities. I think a lot of people are talking about AlterX, and it's great to use AlterX. And McKinsey was actually one of the VCs which was investing in them because they wanted to bring AlterX to its clients and to develop their capabilities in advanced analytics and use it as a tool to sell capability building in advanced analytics, and they put it inside, and later it's become a regular company. But the point
Right.
being, this is just an example how they use these capabilities to sell their own business.
Okay. Got it. Okay. At a very broad level, then, Vadym, how would you define strategy? And then how would you define business strategy?
So I don't distinguish that. So when people talk about strategy, I'm usually thinking about business strategy. So there are like military strategy, culture, political strategy. I always think about business strategy. So I don't distinguish them because those are usually different categories. So when it comes to business strategy, it's usually so when it comes to companies, usually clients of consulting firms are public companies, and they have shareholders, and there is some kind of business model how those shareholders would get their cash back from investing in that company. So strategy is a way how that business model would either work in the future, for example, develops, or expands in new areas. And when it means strategic, it usually means that you would have at the very high level clients or people who would be structured. So it's some kind of top-down approach. But some very rarely you would talk about strategy of business units unless those business units are multi-billion-dollar business units of huge corporations, which themselves would have a strategy team.
Okay. So still, I mean, it's creation of business units. So not business units, creation of the business plan. Is that also part of strategy, or strategy comes after the business plan has been created?
Business plan. And so when I'm talking about business plan, I'm not talking business plan to create a startup. I'm talking business plan of executing already working and established business, like annual strategy plan. It's a very traditional what corporate strategy is doing. But very similar plans would have operational units, for example, business units. They would have their strategy plans, annual plans, which are sometimes aggregated as a corporate plans. So planning is the very definition of strategy, what you need to do. I think a good example is product strategy. Product manager would have ideas what they want to build, they would work on execution, they would have a feeling, they would have intuition, they would know how to put everyone together, make excited, they know emotions, it would just work. What a product strategy person comes in and says that how it structures the process, how it structures the client, what type of segments are there, what's their willingness to pay, which features they care. So kind of create a plan and work with a product manager to help that person create a plan, which later product manager turns into a roadmap. So for example, you would structure the types of clients, structure their pain points, structure their willingness to pay, structure products, you size it, you create a return on investments, you prioritize different capabilities, you prioritize features. You wouldn't prioritize on behalf of product manager, but you would help the product manager to do that. So it's kind of internal consultant for product managers. It's again, you just need an analogy for consulting.
Okay, so what comes before a strategy? Vision?
It depends, because sometimes you do experimentation, you'd go with agile, and not always you have vision. But in general, it is expected that you would have some vision. But very frequently, strategy studies are the vision. The goal of the strategy is to develop vision. Or if you had multiple strategies, you tried multiple products, different markets, different business models. The question is how I can integrate everything into coherent vision. Maybe I don't need some of those products, they just taking my time and they wouldn't pay back. So usually the goal of strategy is to merge smaller strategies into coherent vision and then build plans and work with those plans on building roadmaps. So there will be people who would execute. So you'd have high-level plan where you'd create a business case. For example, return on investments, different aspects of the investment thesis. If, for example, you want to acquire a company, you need to understand how you would generate that value. And value and impact are the words which consultants use a lot. It's the very core of their work.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I mean, this is a lot of work. All right. I have to check. A lot of startups, when they become successful, the whole point of them is disrupting the established players.
Yes.
Sometimes they're creating new markets. Sometimes they are giving a new facet to an existing market. But and again, this is a pretty naive question, but like we've got these amazing capabilities in consultants like McKinsey, BCG, Bain. We've got these established players who have their business model set. They're raking in revenue. They have a lot of profits. There's a nice little economy between the consultants and these industries. How come none of these ever really imagine a disruptor like PayPal coming to the scene or Google coming to the scene? Is this also part of the gambit where you folks are hired to just figure out who the competitors can be, keep an eye out on the startup scape, see if they don't like essentially kill our whole reason of existence? How do you deal with startups?
So, question how big corporations would become like startups. For example, if you are Ford or
Mm,
General Motors and you have
mm,
Tesla, what you should do is a traditional question to consulting firms. How I can become like a startup. And it could
mm,
be like Lemonade, and you would have Liberty Mutual. And question is what Liberty Mutual should do, insurance company, once a insurance tech company emerge and disrupting
right,
the market. It's a very
right,
traditional question.
right.
Usually, uh, consulting firms can do competitive analysis. This is usually work done by internal strategy teams.
Mm,
Competitive analysis is standard for them. But
mm,
where usually consultants are coming if you would have competitors from non-traditional industries. Maybe like if WeChat entered the US, maybe JP Morgan start asking questions. Do we need to be afraid of WeChat? This
okay,
type of when industries cross borders. This is the
right,
type of work when
right.
internal strategy teams wouldn't cope because they don't have experience in new industries.
Right, right. So no, that okay. So that I can still anticipate how that questions can arise because WeChat exists in China. But what I'm saying is there a I don't know like a secret cabal of people in these particular companies trying to just ascertain what could get created when it did not exist in the first place and how that can basically be the end of our business model, right? Is that something which is a line of inquiry?
So usually these type of questions are not on the consultant side, but
Right.
internal strategy teams. So that's basically the core job of corporate strategy teams. And they usually don't do it themselves. They
Mm,
work with business units. So
mm,
usually marketing leaders, product leaders in those business units are thinking about it day to day, and they
right,
just aggregate it. And they can
right,
help them with structured analysis. And if you leave McKinsey, you can
right,
join that big terrifying corporations which want to kill all the startups. And that's when your job would be to figure out, would any startup kill you? And at
right.
which point you need to make buy that startup or start
Mm,
building something internally. But there are a
mm,
lot of reasons why companies wouldn't react to startups, why they wouldn't acquire them, why they would ignore. There are many, many ways. And it very frequently this question just not common to the consultant firms because usually you need some level of maturity of the question. So corporate strategy team needs to understand that it is a serious threat, and they just
mm,
want to say, is it a serious threat or is it existential threat? And maybe they underestimate, and then they go to a consultant firm when they know that these startups are already a big issue, and they maybe
mm,
add someone in China, and now
yeah.
they enter in US with hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. Like imagine TikTok, probably Facebook would ask McKinsey or BCGs, you should be very afraid of TikTok when it's entering the US. It's a valid
Mm,
question, but you do this because TikTok already won in other places. and you would help them better understand what differentiates Facebook from TikTok before TikTok gets into the US, and maybe which client segments would be in danger, and what would be the value proposition to those client segments, which you could potentially use to transform yourself to create a competitor response to TikTok before it gets into the US. Doesn't mean that Facebook would want to become TikTok before TikTok would enter. And that's usually frequently why companies are getting disrupted. They know what is happening, but they're not sure whether they want to react.
Yeah. I mean, this is okay. So this seems like a lot of I don't know how the exact words are not coming to my mind over here. The kind of work that these strategy consultants are doing, they would be doing it for the big industrial houses, the big business players. But then, do they advise foundations as well? Do they advise governments? And are all these people, especially governments, because that's taxpayer money, giving them that big money that they demand? And then, how do they justify it? Like, to you, how does that work?
They
Because the
work
profit motive is out.
They work with social sector, where you work with governmental sectors.
Right.
Usually, they don't make much money there. It's relative. It's not a small practice, but it's smaller than other practices. And government doesn't have that much money. And very frequently, they have high discounts, or they may do a study for free just to maintain these relationships, because maybe the company is a regulator in the market. When a company, that institution is a regulator in this financial market, and they work with everyone in that industry, so they want to maintain these relationships. A lot of business development by partners is through these relationships. And you never know, maybe you as a partner right now do business development for some kind of governmental institution, and then you will be hired as a leader of that institution, and later other partners would come to you, or you would go, right now you work with this regulator as a consultant, tomorrow you would be leading business unit in one of the big players, and you'd have these relationships. So they do this to build this connection, but it's not about business.
Okay, it's a strategic relationship. It might not be strictly speaking about the top line or the bottom line.
It's definitely not profit making. And since like World Economic Forum is probably a big loss in terms of pure money, but it helps with client development. For example, you are invited to such big forums, you meet with a lot of business leaders, and then you would use this opportunity to potentially in the future sell some of your capabilities. But at net over here, this event or the study, you just wouldn't make any money there.
Right. Okay, so we're entering the last segment of the podcast, and I'm going to start getting a little crazy with the questions. Okay, so when we think about, is there a possibility of like a small startup or a small business getting access to the wealth of knowledge that McKinsey has for cheap? Do they have any such programs?
Yes, there are such programs. There are not that many, but it is actually emerging. And there are some very rich startups. So if you have like OpenAI, before no one knew what it is, they already had hundreds of millions of dollars. So I wouldn't be surprised if such startups can afford McKinsey fees. On the other hand, there are programs when they want to get access to tech firms. In general, consulting firms like BCG, Bain, McKinsey, they have very limited access to consulting in tech. They would have access to all tech, Oracles and Cisco's of the world. But when it comes to Google, when it comes to Facebook, Amazon, it's much harder. They don't have those relationships. There are a lot of cultural barriers, for example, between tech. So it's a strategic effort on this on the side of McKinsey's, Bain, BCG's, to work with startups and provide them with the services on the cheap or for free to have those relationships. Because maybe this company in 5 years will be their major client, but it's relatively rare. And there are probably just a couple of programs, probably startups can apply for these. What usually probably happens, big corporations like imagine Intel, they would invest in startup, and
Mm.
then Intel may have a study about the capabilities they need, and then this startup through that study may have access to McKinsey because Intel wants to acquire that startup or they nurture
Right.
that startup for some kind of new business model or some kind of new type of processor or new type of manufacturing. So you probably someone else would pay, not the startups directly.
Okay. So is it correct to think like, have you seen that movie which came out recently, Seinfeld's Frosty, something like that? It was like a comedic take on the invention of Fruit Loops. Anyway, but it was like 1950s America where, these two competitive firms are building the same kind of cereal and all the product development teams, it's real tension, right? So if a business, okay, here's the question. I'm a big business. What kind of questions will I encounter as an executive that will compel me to pick up my phone and wonder if I need a strategic consult? What sort of questions are those?
What you gave as an example, growth strategy is a very typical.
Mm,
So, for example, let's imagine you have Coca-Cola versus Pepsi,
mm,
60s, deep fight. It wouldn't be unsurprising for Pepsi to come in and say, we want to win over Coke. What do
mm.
we need to do?
Yeah,
Very typical question. They
right.
would know Pepsi would know how to win over everyone else, but the
Mm,
question is how we can win over Pepsi, Coke. And that's when McKinsey can bring some of the expertise from doing work for other clients, bring cutting edge research, bring cutting edge capabilities, go into how structure, for example, client research, customer research in a new way, so that maybe they would get some additional insights, or maybe they want to win in specific geographies. So we're talking about growth strategy. For example, how we can gain additional 2-3% of market share. For example, with a focus on younger audience, because in 10 years, they would be our core customers. Very, very typical question.
okay. Okay. So that one is growth. And then the other, what could be like two, three other questions?
Yeah, sure. Where did everything emerged? For saving. Uh, Cost consulting emerged as an industry in 30s during Great Depression. How do I save money? I have a lot of spare capacity. I don't generate enough cash. What should I do? And
Mm,
how to restructure organization, improve operations, how I have 5 factories, how I can produce the same with 2 factories.
right.
Again, very typical question. Other M&A, I want to acquire some other company. Is it a
Mm,
good target for me?
okay.
Diligence, very typical.
Mm, mm. Okay.
I can
All right.
continue across
Yeah. Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
practices.
A big conglomerate could come to you and be like, we are leaders in these industries, but we can see these industries going out of trend. We need to become leaders in other industries. That's something McKinsey could advise.
Yeah,
Right.
I can
Okay.
give another example, very specific ones. Just a
Right.
couple of years ago, Netflix launched their subscription services, and all big TV networks got crazy how we can survive this. So, for example, I was personally working on strategizing how the bundling and products and subscription should look like for one of those cable networks. They have a lot of offerings, they have a lot of channels, they have a lot of content, how they can package it in a subscription service, how they would price that subscription service to cope with new strategies, new digital offerings of other cable networks and Netflix themselves.
Right. Right. How is the company structured? I know you said like a lawyer, but like what's the difference between like a law firm, an accounting firm, and a regular C Corp or an LLC?
So these are partnerships. I don't know the true difference between legal firms and consulting firms. I didn't work in legal firms. I just don't know. So these are
Yeah. Yeah.
partnerships, and partners are independent. They partners own stock. They all contribute to the pool of profit they generate, and at
Right.
the end of the year, they would split that pool. And usually, if you generated more profit than the others, you'll get
Right.
greater share out of that pool, proportional also to the amount of stock you have in the firm. And everyone else are just people working as regular employees.
Okay. So basically, it's like a group of entrepreneurs, and then folks
Yeah.
who rise up, they get promoted. So when somebody gets promoted, do they need to invest as well to become a partner? Or
Actually, yes. Actually,
oh,
yes.
okay,
They
okay,
literally buy stock.
okay.
But the key there is not the stock, but somewhere at the early levels, when the project manager, associate partner, you build some capability, you build
Mm,
some book of business, you build
mm,
teams around yourself, you build associate business analysts who know how to do your work. So you kind
right.
of generate like mini startup inside to serve
Mm.
specific clients.
Right. Okay. Okay. I this is a tangential question, but why do you think professional services firms like consulting, accounting, law, they basically organize themselves as partnerships, whereas other companies are like C corps and LLCs, and they have different structures. Is there something about professional services that like is more conducive to the partnership kind of setup?
It's about culture. For
Mm,
example, my previous consulting firm was acquired by a private equity firm. They try to maintain some kind of hybrid between full ownership, like a C corp, and partnership. But
mm,
what obviously every partner sees very quickly that they have a glass ceiling above them, that all the profits go there. Leadership, for example, shareholders, private equity firm would put a lot of restrictions what they can do, what they can't
mm,
do. They would hold
mm,
their hands. They would set up KPIs which may not be in the best interest of the company. Maybe they just want cash. So
mm.
all of these things change the culture, and
Right,
partnerships allow a lot of independence and flexibility. And
right,
if you want to build the best-in-class capabilities and reinvent yourself every 3 years, you
right.
need that level of culture and that level of independence that those people can pursue best targets, best clients, and offer the best in class to justify your high fees.
Right. But surely there might be trade-offs when it comes to scalability, geographic expansion, raising capital and investments, right?
See, when you are McKinsey and you
Yeah.
sell
But
million-dollar studies, you probably have capital. So that's probably not your biggest consideration. Other firms may not have that level of cash which McKinsey has, for example, Accenture. But the
mm,
difference is that strategy consulting firms, they offer very customized, very tailored, very premium product. There is some level of repeatability there, but it's not that you expect just to outsource to unskilled professional in Asia or somewhere else. You may have some top talent in India, you may have some top talent in Eastern Europe, you may have top talent in Central America, but you don't expect that work to be done by a person who didn't think I didn't do this before. And the
mm,
idea is there, you don't want those the traditional synergies of scale that you
mm,
can outsource and move that people who have never done this just because of sheer scale and structure. You can suddenly put a person who just finished university, never knows anything about this, and can still do this. For example, Accenture would have 700,000 people, and they don't
mm,
have high salaries, but
mm.
their structure allows them to have all those synergies and mm, advantages which you just mentioned of traditional corporation, whereas
Right,
you wouldn't have level of flexibility and premium service, which is traditional in strategy consulting and management consulting. For example, EY's, Big Fours, and a lot of boutiques. Even if you are not considered McKinsey, you're just a boutique, you still provide very tailored premium service. It's a very expensive service. So they
mm,
want to make sure that it's done in the right way. And I can guarantee that if this work can be done by a traditional corporation, there would be some alarm of these corporations, of McKinsey, Bain, BCGs, who would just turn it into capability, create a startup, and so start selling. And I guarantee that as soon as that happens, McKinsey, Bain, BCG wouldn't be offering that service. So
mm.
it's just self-defeating, that when it can be done by anyone or can be replicated, you need to do something else.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Okay. If a company says to one of these big three that you come and build us an internal management consulting unit within the company, would they oblige? In a way, their future business is getting taken away from them now.
Corporate strategy teams, internal strategy teams, they do strategy work, but the scope of work is different from work done by consulting firms. Their goal is structure planning and help build alignment between boards and CSU and the business units, and accelerate the implementation and make sure that you don't waste a lot of money. This is not the work done by consulting firms, but they can come in and build such strategy capabilities. And a lot of partners go as senior leaders in the strategy teams in big firms who didn't have strategy teams, become a very influential leader, and many of them would eventually become either VPs or CEOs of those huge corporations. So it's, I wouldn't say it's a traditional path, but it's a very frequently emerging path for senior leaders of consulting firms.
Perfect. Okay, so this, I guess, strategy is the only tool of survival and thriving in the future, and they've captured quite a decent amount of market. There has to be more kind of growth as well. Okay, I guess to conclude, Vadym, do you have any parting thoughts? Because this might need another episode, to be honest with you, because I have so many other questions, and we're running out of time. So, any parting thoughts from you?
It's an fascinating industry, but you may have a lot of misconceptions about lifestyle, capacity, how much time you need to invest to get in, what you can get out. It's definitely not a solution for everyone. And if you want to get there, you just want to make sure that's what you want. Because if you spend a lot of time and actually get in, you may be disappointed. And there are a lot of people who were disappointed. And a lot of people would leave after a year or two. So you can reach your dream if it is your dream, but just be mindful. And if you want to do planning for others, do planning for yourself.
Yeah, indeed. All right, perfect. Thank you very much, and see you soon, folks. Thank you, Vadym. Bye-bye.